The actions of these guests that had been invited that drove Jesus to telling this parable were and are reminiscent of what I imagine to be one of the greatest problems that confronts us in this day and age, social problems. And that is entitlement. Now, by way of introduction, let me say that this particular parable of Jesus has been described mostly as a rather domestic kind of parable. One commentator described it as a homely parable, while another suggested that we consider this passage as something of the table talk of Jesus, playing, of course, with the title of the famous Lutheran work, The Table Talk of Martin Luther. And in a way, they're quite right. See, in essence, this parable is plain. It's simple and domestic, homely in nature. It is nothing more than a story-like retelling of Proverbs chapter 25, verses 6 to 7, where we read, "Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great, for it is better to be told, 'Come up here,' than to be put lower in the presence of a noble." So in essence, this parable is rather simple, rather domestic in nature. But we do it a grave disservice if we consider it simply as something of an etiquette lesson from Jesus, right? Because in effect, in essence, it is simple, but in effect, these words of Jesus are a force for social critique. They are a challenge to self-reflection and an invitation to humility. And here's why I say this. The actions of these guests that had been invited that drove Jesus to telling this parable were and are reminiscent of what I imagine to be one of the greatest problems that confronts us in this day and age, social problems. And that is entitlement. Entitlement. We see it playing out in so many different ways as we go about our daily lives. This idea of entitlement. Now, I'm not going to go too much into social critique here this morning. I'm just going to point out a couple of examples. Consider the way service staff are often treated. Consider the way we respond to and engage with those who render service to us. In other words, over whom we have a measure of influence or power or whatever the case might be. And how poorly they are treated, because there is inherent in us, in this modern day and age, in this society, this sense of entitlement, that somehow we deserve better service. Somehow we are entitled to a particular level of treatment by virtue of who we are or who we imagine ourselves to be.